David stood in line at the grocery store with his last $53 in cash. He was buying ramen, eggs, and peanut butter, enough food to last until his paycheck in 5 days. 24 years old, working at a call center for $12 per hour, living paycheck to paycheck in a shared apartment where his rent was $450 monthly, more than a quarter of his income gone before he could breathe. While waiting in line, he overheard two people talking about flipping items on Facebook Marketplace. One said, "I bought a dresser for $40, cleaned it up, and sold it for $120 in 3 days." David's mind started racing. $80 profit in 3 days from $40 invested? That was a 200% return. What if he used his last $50 not for extra food, but as starting capital? The idea terrified him. $50 was all he had until payday. If he failed, he'd be eating ramen 3 times a day for 5 days. But if he succeeded, he could turn 50 into 100, 100 into 200, and keep compounding. Standing at the checkout, David made a split-second decision that would change everything. He put back the extra groceries, kept just the essentials for $15, and walked out with $50 in cash designated for investment. He had no experience flipping items. No truck to transport furniture. No tools for repairs. Just $50, a smartphone, and a theory that he could buy low and sell high if he was strategic. David gave himself a challenge. Turn $50 into $5,000 in 90 days using a 5-step system he'd create as he went. It sounded impossible. But impossible was better than being broke forever. David's $50 flipping journey started with research, not purchasing. He spent the first evening studying Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and OfferUp to understand what sold quickly and profitably. He learned several key principles. Small items that could be carried without a vehicle sold faster than furniture. Items people needed immediately commanded better prices than luxury goods. Underpriced listings appeared constantly from people who needed cash fast or didn't know true value. He identified his first target category: electronics and small appliances. People constantly sold working items cheap because they'd upgraded, were moving, or needed quick cash. David's strategy crystallized into what would become his 5-step system. Step 1. Find underpriced items worth 50 to 150% more than asking price. Step 2. Negotiate price down further, offering cash and immediate pickup. Step 3. Clean, test, photograph professionally with good lighting and descriptions. Step 4. List at market value, price firm, respond quickly to inquiries. Step 5. Reinvest 100% of profit into next flip, compounding capital each cycle. On day 2, David found his first opportunity, a Keurig coffee maker listed for $40. The photos were terrible, dark, cluttered background, but the description said, "Works perfect, just upgraded." Market research showed working Keurigs sold for $80 to $95. David messaged offering $35 cash. Pick up today. The seller accepted. David rode the bus 45 minutes with his $35 to pick it up. The Keurig worked perfectly, just needed cleaning. He spent 2 hours deep cleaning it, descaling with vinegar, polishing the exterior until it looked nearly new. He photographed it against a white sheet with natural window lighting, wrote a detailed description emphasizing, "Cleaned, descaled, works perfectly, includes photos proving function." Listed at $85. Within 6 hours, someone offered $75 and asked to pick up that evening. David accepted. $75 revenue minus $35 cost equals $40 profit. His $50 had become $90 in 48 hours. He'd proven the system worked. Now he needed to scale it through reinvestment and repetition. Week 1 established David's rhythm and refined his system. With $90 in capital, he could take on 2 simultaneous flips instead of 1. He found a Roomba vacuum listed for $50. Works but battery doesn't hold charge long. Market research. Working Roombas sold for $140 to $170. Replacement batteries cost $22 on Amazon. David offered $40, accepted. Bought replacement battery for $22. Total investment, $62. After battery replacement and cleaning, listed at $139, below market to sell fast. Sold in 24 hours for $139. Profit, $77. Simultaneously, he'd bought a barely used Instant Pot for $28. Seller didn't want it after receiving his gift. Listed for $69 after cleaning and professional photos. Sold in 18 hours for $65. Profit, $37. Week 1 results. Started with $50, ended with $241. He'd nearly quintupled his capital in 7 days through 4 flips. The compound effect was working. But David also learned week 1's hard lessons. He'd wasted 4 hours on a good deal that turned out to be broken beyond his ability to fix, lost $15. He'd been scammed once by a fake buyer who never showed, wasted 2 hours. He'd underpriced one item and sold it immediately, realizing he could have gotten $20 more. These mistakes taught him refinement. Always test electronics thoroughly before buying. Require deposits from buyers for holds. Research pricing more carefully to maximize profit without sacrificing speed. By end of week 2, through 8 total flips with improving strategy, David had grown his capital to $417. He was averaging $50 to $80 profit per flip, completing 2 to 3 flips weekly. His system was working, but he realized he'd hit a scaling problem. His $50 starting point had limited him to small electronics and appliances. With $400, he could move into higher margin categories like furniture, power tools, and outdoor equipment where single flips could generate $150 to $300 profit. Step 5 of his system, reinvest 100%, meant his capacity was growing exponentially, but he needed to stay disciplined and not pull money out for personal use despite desperately needing things. Week 3 marked David's transition to higher value items. With $417 in capital, he found a listing that would test his system's scalability. A needs minor repair riding lawn mower for $250. Market value for working model, $800 to $900. The seller said it just needs a new spark plug and carburetor cleaning. David knew nothing about lawnmower repair, but he spent 3 hours that evening watching YouTube videos learning small engine basics. He offered $225, accepted. Spent $17 on a spark plug and carburetor cleaning kit. Total investment, $242, nearly 60% of his capital in one flip. The risk was enormous. If he couldn't fix it, he'd lose most of his accumulated wealth. David spent 6 hours over 2 days learning to disassemble the carburetor, clean it properly, replace the spark plug, and reassemble everything. When he pulled the starter cord, the engine turned over immediately and ran perfectly. He detailed the mower, sharpened the blade, took professional photos, and listed it for $749 with detailed description and video of it running. Within 48 hours, a landscaping company offered $700 cash for immediate pickup. David accepted. $700 revenue minus $242 cost equals $458 profit. His capital had jumped from $417 to $875 in 1 week through a single high-risk, high-reward flip. He doubled his money in 5 days. But the mower flip taught him crucial lessons. Higher value items required more skill, knowledge, and time but generated proportionally much higher returns. His willingness to learn new skills through free YouTube resources exponentially expanded what he could flip profitably. The risk of concentrating capital into single flips was real. If the mower hadn't been fixable, he'd have lost weeks of progress. By week 4, David had refined his portfolio strategy, maintained some capital in safe, quick-turn electronics while taking calculated risks on higher-value items that required repair or refurbishment. Through this balanced approach, he grew his capital to $1,347 by day 30. He was 1 quarter toward his $5,000 goal at the 1/3 time point, slightly ahead of pace. More importantly, he developed skills in electronics repair, small engine mechanics, furniture restoration, and appliance troubleshooting, all learned free through YouTube while executing flips. These skills were worth more than the capital because they expanded his future earning potential infinitely. Weeks 5 through 7 saw David's operation scale dramatically. With over $1,000 in capital, he could run 3 to 4 simultaneous flips in different value tiers. One high-value item generating $300 to $500 profit, 2 medium items generating $100 to $200 each, 1 to 2 quick-turn small electronics generating $50 to $80 for fast capital recycling. His apartment had become a workshop, corner dedicated to item photography with white backdrop and lighting setup, area for repairs and cleaning, inventory of basic tools accumulated from flips he'd kept rather than resold. David's girlfriend initially supported the side hustle but was getting frustrated. "Our apartment looks like a warehouse. You're spending every evening and weekend on this. Is $5,600 really worth consuming your entire life?" She had a point. David was working his 40-hour call center job, then spending 25 to 30 hours weekly on flips, sourcing, negotiating, picking up, repairing, photographing, listing, coordinating sales, delivering. He was exhausted, but he was also 60 days into a 90-day goal and at $2,173, 43% toward $5,000 with 30 days remaining. He'd need to average about $94 profit per day for the final month to hit the goal. That required maintaining momentum despite fatigue and relationship strain. David explained to his girlfriend, "I know this is intense. It's temporary. Just 30 more days. If I hit $5,000, I'll have proven the system works. Then I can either continue at a slower, sustainable pace or stop entirely. But I can't quit at day 60 after all this work." She understood but asked him to promise that day 91, regardless of outcome, he'd take a week completely off from flipping to reconnect with normal life. David agreed. The negotiation taught him something important. Extreme pursuit of any goal has costs: time, energy, relationships, life balance. Those costs must be acknowledged and managed, not ignored. The final 30 days required not just financial strategy but relational and personal sustainability strategy too. David scaled back slightly, 3 simultaneous flips instead of 4, 1 day per weekend off for relationship time, maintained the 25-hour weekly commitment but with better boundaries. His pace slowed marginally but remained aggressive enough to hit the goal if he stayed focused. The final 30 days became a sprint to the finish. David identified his highest margin opportunity: outdoor power equipment. Spring was approaching, and people were buying lawn mowers, pressure washers, and leaf blowers eagerly. He'd learned enough about small engines to confidently repair most issues. Week 8, bought a pressure washer for $180. Doesn't start. Diagnosed carburetor issue. Repaired for $12 in parts. Sold for $475. Profit, $283. Bought a parts-only lawnmower for $95. Spent 6 hours and $38 repairing transmission and deck. Sold for $499. Profit, $366. Bought a leaf blower for $45. Runs rough. Cleaned carburetor. Replaced fuel filter for $8. Sold for $149. Profit, $96. Week 8 profit, $745. Capital end of week 8, $2,918. Week 9, David took a calculated risk, bought a non-running riding mower for $350. Complete engine rebuild required. He spent 12 hours over 4 days learning engine disassembly and rebuild through YouTube. Parts cost $127. Total investment, $477. When he finished the rebuild and the engine roared to life, David felt genuine accomplishment. He just successfully rebuilt a small engine from scratch through self-teaching. Listed for $1,200. Sold in 36 hours for $1,150. Profit, $673. Additional smaller flips that week, $312 combined profit. Week 9 total profit, $985. Capital end of week 9, $3,903. Week 10 final week, David needed $1,097 to hit his $5,000 goal. He had 7 days. He took on every high-margin flip he could find: pressure washer, riding mower, Roomba, power drill set, Instant Pot. Some he repaired, some just needed cleaning and professional marketing. He worked every evening until midnight, all day Saturday and Sunday. His girlfriend brought him food while he worked, supporting the final push. By day 89, with 1 day remaining, David's capital stood at $4,831. He was $169 short. On day 90, his final listed item, a pressure washer he'd repaired, sold for $295. After the $78 purchase and repair costs, his profit was $217. Final capital, $5,048. David had turned $50 into $5,048 in exactly 90 days, a 100-fold return, through strategic flipping, reinvestment, self-teaching, and refusing to quit despite exhaustion and relationship strain. Day 91. The day after achieving his goal, David woke up and did something he hadn't done in 3 months. Nothing related to flipping. He kept his promise to his girlfriend. They spent the day hiking, having a long lunch, watching movies, normal couple activities that had vanished during the 90-day sprint. That evening, David reflected on what the challenge had actually taught him. The $5,000 was meaningful. It was 10 times more money than he'd ever had at once. But the real value was everything else he'd discovered. First, compound growth through reinvestment is real. His $50 had become $5,000 not because any single flip made $9,950, but because each profit was immediately reinvested to enable larger subsequent flips. The snowball effect worked exactly as the math predicted. Second, skills are more valuable than capital. His $50 starting capital was less important than his willingness to learn repair skills, photography, pricing strategy, and negotiation through free resources. Those skills meant he could start over with $50 tomorrow and generate the same results. Third, focused intensity beats passive consistency for breakthrough results. David had worked approximately 325 hours across 90 days on flipping, essentially a part-time job. That intense focused effort generated $10,000 in gross revenue and $5,000 in net profit beyond his starting capital. Spreading the same effort casually over 2 years would have generated far less due to lost momentum and learning. Fourth, every system has costs. David's success cost him time, relationship strain, exhausted weekends, and 3 months of having zero life outside work and flipping. Those costs were worth it for a time-limited goal, but they weren't sustainable indefinitely. Fifth, once you prove you can do something, you can do it again. David had proven he could turn $50 into $5,000. That knowledge meant he'd never feel completely trapped by money circumstances again. He always had a system he could deploy if needed. But David also recognized what he didn't want: to keep flipping forever. The 90-day sprint had been meaningful as a challenge and proof of concept, but it wasn't a lifestyle he loved. It was a skill and system he could use when needed, not an identity he wanted permanently. 3 months after completing the 90-day challenge, David's life had found a new equilibrium. He kept flipping, but at a sustainable pace, 1 or 2 items per month, generating $300 to $600 supplemental income without consuming his life. The $5,000 from the challenge had been allocated strategically: $1,000 emergency fund, first time having real savings, $2,000 invested in index funds through Robinhood, learning about long-term wealth building, $1,500 used to upgrade essentials, new laptop for better photos, basic tool set, reliable transportation, $500 kept as flipping working capital for future opportunities. His call center job was still his primary income, but the flipping side hustle plus the passive income beginning from his investments had transformed his financial psychology. He was no longer living paycheck to paycheck. He had margin, options, and growing confidence. David also started teaching his system to others. He wrote a detailed guide called 50 to 5,000, the 5-step flipping system, and posted it in Financial Freedom Facebook groups. The guide included his exact process, lessons learned, profitable categories, common mistakes, time investment required, and realistic expectations. The post went viral, over 5,000 comments and 1,200 shares. People started following the system. Day 15, turn $60 into $240 following your steps. I've made $800 in 1 month using your 5-step method. This actually works if you do the work. Some people messaged asking if David would coach them for a fee. He started offering 1-hour coaching calls for $50 where he'd review their listings, pricing strategy, and repair approaches. The coaching generated another $200 to $300 monthly with minimal time investment, teaching people to replicate his success. 6 months after the original challenge, David received a message that made everything worth it. "I followed your system. I started with $73. I just hit $3,000 after 67 days. I'm a single mom and this extra income is literally keeping us from eviction. Thank you for sharing your knowledge for free. You saved my family." David read the message 3 times, his eyes watering. The $5,000 he'd made had changed his own life, but teaching others the system was changing their lives. That impact was worth more than any dollar amount. 1 year after the original $50 investment, David sat down to calculate his complete return on that initial decision. The direct financial return, $50 initial capital, became $5,048 after 90 days, 100-fold return. That $5,000 had been allocated to emergency fund, investments, equipment, and working capital. His continued casual flipping generated approximately $4,000 additional over the following 9 months. His investments had grown to $2,300 with market gains. His coaching income had generated $1,800. Total financial transformation, approximately $13,148 net worth created from an initial $50 investment, 1 year total time, with approximately 500 hours invested across the year. Effective rate, approximately $26 per hour, double his call center wage, but with skills and systems that would compound indefinitely. But David understood the real return wasn't measurable in dollars. The real return was psychological. He'd proven to himself that he could identify an opportunity, create a system, execute relentlessly, and achieve seemingly impossible results. He'd learned that starting capital wasn't the barrier. Most people could find $50 to $100 if they prioritized it. The real barriers were knowledge, which was free through YouTube and internet research, and willingness to execute despite uncertainty and discomfort. David kept the original $50 bill, the one he'd walked out of the grocery store with after putting back the extra food. He'd never spent it, preserving it as a symbolic reminder. He framed it with a note. This $50 became $5,000 through a system: find underpriced items, negotiate lower, refurbish professionally, price strategically, reinvest completely. The money didn't change my life. The decision to use it strategically instead of consuming it, that changed everything. He also kept a photo from day one, himself holding the $50 bill and a notebook with day 1, $50, day 90, $5,000 written on it. Next to it, a photo from day 90 holding a bank statement showing $5,048. The before and after wasn't about the money. It was about the transformation from someone who believed he was trapped by circumstances to someone who knew he could create opportunity from almost nothing. On the anniversary of his first flip, David posted a reflection. 1 year ago, I had $53 at a grocery store checkout. I overheard someone talking about flipping items. I made a decision that terrified me. Use my last $50 as investment capital instead of food security. 90 days later, I turned that 50 into 5,000 through strategic flipping and 100% reinvestment. Today, that decision has generated over $13,000 in net worth and taught me that financial transformation doesn't require inheritance, luck, or starting capital. It requires a system, free education through YouTube, and the courage to start with whatever you have. $50 wasn't magic. The 5-step system was repeatable by anyone. The willingness to learn skills through free resources and execute despite fear, that's what created the result. If you have $50 to $100 and you're willing to work 15 to 25 hours weekly for 90 days, you can replicate what I did. The opportunity exists. The knowledge is free. The only question is whether you'll start. The post received 8,000 comments, but the one that mattered most was from a young woman who wrote, Day 1, $42 invested in my first flip. Day 90, here I come. Thank you for showing me the path exists. David smiled, remembering himself at that grocery store checkout 1 year ago, holding $50 and a decision. That decision had changed everything, not because $50 was a lot of money, but because choosing to invest it instead of consume it had initiated a compound effect that was still multiplying. Sometimes financial transformation isn't about how much you start with, it's about what you choose to do with whatever you have. David had chosen to build instead of consume, and that choice, repeated through a 5-step system 90 times, had turned $50 into $5,000 and proven that opportunity is accessible to anyone brave enough to start.